Zoe Shurgold, now you're International PR Manager for Tourism Victoria, but Melbourne is very much the gateway to Victoria, and people identify, and I notice you in your branding, call it Melbourne Victoria. And I think there's probably something quite purposeful in that, in saying Melbourne Gateway, Victoria State, that's sort of right behind it. Yesterday in the presentations, you talked about a lot of really exciting stuff that's happening in Melbourne, and your positioning in the marketplace in terms of Australia generally, you know, Sydney, gateway to Australia, where Melbourne. Tell me a little bit more about that and the market growth and the business growth you've had recently in Melbourne.
Sure. I mean, I do think we use the Melbourne brand more internationally because people really associate Melbourne with Australia and the gateway to Victoria. There are other Victorias in the other parts of the world, so Melbourne, with our really strong Melbourne logo, just really represents what we're all about. The Melbourne logo sort of really epitomises Melbourne. It's sort of like a book with many layers, and many people think about Melbourne as a city like that. It's not necessarily what you see on top, it's all the layers underneath that make it so interesting. So
it's an amazing city though, isn't it, in a sense? And you know, I sort of describe, people ask me, Americans particularly all the time, saying, you know, what's the difference between Sydney and Melbourne? And I said, well, if you imagine a car that can do 150 miles an hour or whatever, okay? So there's two cars, they can both do 150 miles an hour. Sydney's more like a sort of a Cadillac, okay? And it's got white wall tyres, and it's brash, and it's got a drop head and all this sort of stuff, right? And then Melbourne's more like a Jaguar. It's as fast, but it's got leather seats, it's much more stylish, it's much more sort of calm in getting there, even though it gets you there just as quickly. And that's the feeling I get around both locations. In terms of Melbourne, food, shopping, culture, it seems to me that Melbourne's emerging as the centre in Australia for those sort of activities, entertainment, events and so on. So how are you positioning Melbourne in terms of that?
Well, I think the great thing about Australia and Melbourne and Sydney is they are both so different, and they both offer something completely different. So for international visitors, it's not enough just to go to Sydney and think that they've seen Australia and that they've seen that urban.
That really irritates me when people say, oh, I've been to Australia, I've allocated 3 days to Australia, Sydney. You go, oh,
well,
okay.
yeah, exactly. And in Melbourne, you could spend several weeks and still only be scratching the surface. So I think what Melbourne offers is, like you say, that sort of style and sophistication, which has evolved over many, many years from the different migration that we've had from very stylish places like Italy, like parts of the UK. And so what we offer is something that's a very deep and rich experience, and that's on many levels, from the arts and culture that we offer, which is everything from really prestigious arts institutions like the National Gallery of Victoria to a really great underbelly of amazing artisan and creative communities of galleries that really, the arts are sort of sewn into the fabric of the city, and our food and wine, which is really probably the thing that's put Melbourne on the map internationally just lately. I think the world is starting to take notice of what we offer, which is just an amazing diversity of food, innovative chefs, amazing produce, and a food scene that's not necessarily attached to one particular culture or creed. It's really very influenced, and it's constantly changing and emerging, so it's very exciting.
Tell me something, is Melbourne still the second largest Greek community in the world?
Outside Athens, that's correct.
It's amazing, isn't it? It's quite incredible. Let's talk about events for a second, because Melbourne does quite rightly say, quite continuously, it's the events capital of Australia. Tell me about the current events you have, any new events that are happening.
So at the moment in May, just in May, I mean, we've got some amazing events that happen, from the Indian Film Festival to the Emerging Writers Festival. We've got a couple of really great events coming up. So I mentioned the NGV, they're doing the Jean-Paul Gaultier, which is the only exhibition of that in Asia Pacific. That's going to be really strong for us, particularly in that Asia Pacific region, especially with those countries like China and Asia that are really into that really strong fashion. They're also doing the Italian masterpieces later on this year. At the moment, a really popular one is the Australian Centre for Moving Image, which is playing DreamWorks. It's an exhibition that was curated especially for Melbourne. It hasn't gone anywhere else, and we have the top dogs of DreamWorks come over to launch that. It's been amazingly popular, especially with the families during that school period.
Just on events though as well, King Kong, right? Somebody told me, and I think you may have mentioned it yesterday, King Kong the stage show was created in Melbourne, is now moving from Melbourne to Broadway.
Yeah, and that's just an example of, the company's called Global Creatures, and they're based out in a little warehouse out in Kensington in West Melbourne, and they are totally pioneering this whole new genre of puppetry in theatre. So they've created things things like the Walking with the Dinosaurs show, and then King Kong is their first foray into the world of theatre, musical theatre. I don't know if you saw it, but King Kong was this 6 foot tall, amazing animatronic puppet. You know, his eye movements in itself are just amazing. So this is just an example of the ingenuity of Melbourne. They created this idea from concept. It was a 5-year plan from concept through to productions. Yeah, and now the event, it's moving to Broadway. So we're really proud of that.
Now, what about hotels in Melbourne? Okay, because I know that there's been an issue, over the last few years about shortage of hotel accommodation and very expensive and stuff like that. Are more hotels coming online?
Yeah, they are, and it's really exciting. We just saw the opening of the Sheraton, which is the first 5-star hotel to open in Melbourne for quite a long time. And we've got brands like Tune, which is the Malaysian no frills hotel, so really catering to that sort of more budget crowd. We've got a really great brand called Avolo, which is the boutique hotel brand from Hong Kong. They opened a really boutique-y laneway style hotel in Little Bourke Street, and they've just taken over another property in Lonsdale Street. So that's just an example of a couple. We've got some really great regional hotels that have opened up, new builds from the RACV at Torquay, and another one in Portsea called the Mercury Hotel. So regionally we have more accommodation stock. In Melbourne, where it can be tough to get accommodation during those really peak periods, like during the Australian Open.
It's a busy place,
and Melbourne Cup Carnival. So I think that there's a much broader range of hotels that are opening up to all levels of budget. So it's actually a 30% increase in the last 10 years, and it's only continuing. There's a lot of great new projects on the
So Zoe, just in terms of visitation to Melbourne, so what sort of volume are you talking about into Melbourne as a city? And then subsequently, how many of those people actually spread out into regional Victoria? And are you seeing growth from Asia, particularly from the sort of what's supposed to be the booming Chinese markets?
Yeah, we are. We had almost 2 million visitors internationally to Melbourne in the last year. That is mostly coming from the Asian markets. China is our biggest market at the moment. We're seeing a lot of growth from places like India and Indonesia. But still, New Zealand is our second biggest market.
Amazing, isn't it?
They're quite happy to jump on a plane at quite short notice to come and see the latest exhibitions and shows. So it's almost our secondary domestic market. New Zealand's very much treated as in the same way as a domestic.
Tell the Kiwis that, but that's okay. New Zealand, you're a domestic market.
Well,
no, I know what you mean, though, but
It's actually complimentary to them because we know that they know Melbourne very well. So
But they will get on the plane to go see a show in Melbourne. It's quite amazing.
US and UK are traditional Western markets. And they've done really well this year. US and UK have gone through a dip in recent times, and they've shown a really good recovery this year. And that's good because they do tend to spread out to our regions, and Western markets in particular. They love to visit places like Great Ocean Road, Yarra Valley. We've really seen Gippsland on the rise as well. But internationally, we have a really good regional story to tell. In the last 5 years, we've had a 10% growth in regional visitation. In fact, in the last year. And we're not only seeing our traditional markets like Phillip Island and Great Ocean Road, which is still really popular, but we're seeing them go to places like the Murray and Gippsland, which are just two very distinct regions.
I never realised that the Murray was such a golfing mecca.
Oh, absolutely.
Golfers around the world know about the Murray. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if they do, but certainly domestically they do.
Oh, serious golfers do. They know it as a place to go and play several courses in a week. But look, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate it. And obviously, Melbourne and Victoria are in safe hands with you in terms of international PR and so on. And what I like about Melbourne, I come back to the sort of corollary, I suppose, the comparison of the Cadillac and the Jaguar. I do feel that Melbourne is very much like a Jaguar. It's stylish, it's sophisticated, it's got nice soft leather seats. You'll get there just as quickly, but in much more style.
We'll take that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.